It's New York! Alright, guys, follow my Instagram. Anyways, without further ado, let's grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary stories that happen in New York!
A demon named Mark. Living on the streets of New York, you definitely meet a fair share of weirdos. Being a bit strange myself, the average wingnuts don't bother me too much, but every once in a while, somebody comes along and really freaks you the hell out. It was last summer at 4 in the morning, and I was drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette in the Union Square. No one was out besides a few college kids fucking around in the park, and the usual home buns. I was halfway through my beer when I saw him. The man with no shirt or shoes, carrying a rusty broom handle, walking along the path in my direction. Just how he was walking gave me a weird vibe. From the clink of the broom on every other step, to the way he seemed to wave his arms in a swooping motion. He was around 50 feet away when he noticed me and made direct eye contact. "You!" the man exclaimed as he came running up to me. "Yes?" I responded as he stood in front of me, panting, with pupils as big as his eyes themselves. "Demon, I have already banished you from here. How dare you come back, Mark?" At this point, I'm confused as hell. I had a lot to drink that night, and this guy was obviously on some sort of psychedelics. It looked like PCP. "Whoa, dude," I reply. "I think you got the wrong guy. I'm Joe." "Prove it," he says. As I go to reach for my ID, he promptly begins to scream again. "Never mind, I know your tricks, demon. You are Mark and must be stopped." He then starts screaming random sounds and noises while beating that rusty broom handle on the ground in front of me. Needless to say, I grabbed my backpack, hopped on my skateboard, and tried to get the hell away from this nut job. But as soon as I started my getaway, he was on my heels again, chasing me. "Mark," is what I heard him yelling as he charged me down Broadway. "Be gone!" I skated my ass off for over 10 blocks before he stopped chasing me, and didn't stop until I made it another 20. I never met that wingnut again, nor do I want to. Ironically, I have been confused for a demon in a separate incident, but that's a story for another time. Almost got stabbed on a field trip. So this happened back in 6th grade, and I think it's the closest I've ever come to dying. At the school in which I went to, we always used to have some big end-of-the-year field trip. We'd usually go to some city and look at all the important or historic buildings, have lunch, learn some shit, and leave. That year, we were going to New York, and me and a couple of friends planned out what we wanted to do. We wanted to do our own thing, go shopping, get some new clothes, that kind of thing. Only when we got to school the next day, the teachers made it really clear that we had to stick with the group. But since we were all stupid, rebellious 6th graders, we decided we just have to work around that. On the ride to New York, me, my friend Olivia, and my friend Devin decided we were going to leave the group and do whatever we wanted. Our class was pretty big, almost 60 of us, because they put 5, 6, and 7 together. So we thought if we weren't going too long, nobody would notice. We had brought money and we planned on buying tons of stuff, because even though we were a big class, we lived in a small town with only a couple of stores. Olivia loved shopping, and she had actually researched the area we were going to be around and picked out all the good stores. She even made us a little map. She was good at that kind of stuff. Anyways, when we got to New York, Devin chickened out because his parents were pretty strict and he didn't want to get his phone taken away again. Olivia and I decided that he could just give us his money and we'd buy his stuff for him. So he did that, and after they herded everybody off the bus, we kind of lingered back. We were right about them being distracted by everyone else, because we got away no problem. Olivia's math worked out pretty good, and we were gone probably 10 or 20 minutes before shit started getting scary. We had just left the store, and Olivia was carrying her shopping bags when this guy noticed us. It probably wasn't hard to pick us out. 2 little 6th graders walking around alone, carrying a shit ton of clothes. He started calling out to us, saying how he could buy us more clothes, all the jewelry we wanted, if we just come with him. We didn't believe him, of course. We just kept walking, heading on to the next store. Only this guy wouldn't stop talking. He started following us now, and getting kinda pissed that we wouldn't answer him. I told him to fuck off, because I thought that he would at least take a hint, right? There was tons of people around, and we figured he couldn't really kidnap us in front of 200 people. But he kept following us, and he started getting a little closer, and a lot closer. He had probably been 30 or 40 yards back, when we could barely see him over the other people. But now he was only 15 or 20 feet. That's when we started panicking, because shit, there was a child molester after us, and we had no idea where the group was. We decided to split off from the sidewalk and head down into some alley, because we figured people would call out the guy if he started to follow us. But of course, it was New York, and everybody else was all wrapped up in their own little problems. So now we're walking down this dark friggin' alley, and this guy is still after us. He fell a little back, probably back to about 30 feet now, but he's not pretending to be a good guy anymore. He's talking about how he's gonna fucking kill us, and how they'll never find our bodies, and how much fun he's gonna have with us. And he's smiling this deranged grin the whole time. We're both on the verge of tears now, because we figure this fucking sociopath is about to kill us. Olivia just decides to drop her shit and yells, "Run!" So we both start running, and we're probably around halfway through this alley. But then she turns around and she friggin' screams. So I turn around, and I see the psychopath is running after us now too, and he has a knife. We're both screaming now, and I'm running faster than I've ever have before, and we just run out of the alley back into this crowd of people. And as we try to get into this group of people to make sure this guy can't stab us to death, I turn around, and he's just standing back in the alley, smiling. And I turn back around, and this random lady is asking us what's wrong, because we're both sobbing, and Olivia's dress is ripped and I'm bleeding, because my arm scraped the wall and we're crying so hard we can't talk. As soon as we actually manage to talk, we tell her our school, and she looks it up, and calls them, and somehow manage to find our group again. We're both forced to stay right next to the teachers, because they don't trust us anymore, and I honestly don't blame them. We didn't even tell them about the man though. And as soon as I get home, I'm grounded, and my phone is taken away, but still nobody but me and Olivia knows about that man. School ends a couple days later, and I get my phone back. So I text Olivia, and she sends me a picture of our class in front of some important building and says, "Look in the bottom left corner," and that the man is in it, mostly hidden behind some wall, but you can still see his face, smiling, that deranged grin for the camera. We never really talked about the man again. I didn't want to bring it up, and Olivia doesn't either. I'm terrified of cities now. I like to stick to a couple towns near me, and that's it. There's a lower chance of getting stabbed to death. A part of New York City I was glad to leave behind. The following story comes from 2013, when I was making my living as a bartender in a small lounge just off Washington Square Park. Lopez was a Sunday brunch regular that I dreaded seeing every weekend. An elderly Latino man. He was both very gay and very wealthy, having formerly been a high-ranking employee at the UN. It may seem strange to say, but Lopez was different from your average gay man. He was a special breed. He had been gay since being gay in New York was dangerous. This has made him tough and pushy. Though Lopez was old and frail in appearance, he was an intimidating bastard in spirit. When he had set his eyes on a target, nothing could frighten him off its trail. I, unfortunately, became that target even before realizing it. I was a tall, broad-shouldered 25-year-old man at the time, My image was the last thing that came to mind when I thought victim of sexual harassment. That's why it caught me so off guard. At first, Lopez and I made the regular small talk. I told him about myself, he told me about himself, then I served him his glass of liquor and went about my business. Soon, however, Lopez began staying through my entire shift and demanding my attention virtually the entire time. He would even go out of his way to frighten off the other regulars I chat with. His tone changed. It went from cordial to syrupy sweet. The conversations he trapped me in began focusing more and more on past sexual exploits and lovers. That's when he started to make moves. "Sometimes I just want to fuck you so bad," he'd say, or, "If I could just see you in a thong." I wasn't about to have this at work, so I told my friend and manager. He blew me off, however, told me Lopez was a nice guy, and that he'd take really good care of me if I let him. I was shocked by this. When I told the general manager, he went one step further and accused me of being homophobic. At this point, I knew it was up to me to handle this. The next Sunday, when Lopez sat at the bar, I looked him dead in the face and said, "Don't fuck with me today. I'm not interested, and I will not be harassed." Even while I spoke, Lopez's lips curled into a smile. He was pleased that he had shaken me this much. I felt immediately powerless. The following Sunday was to be my last. I had given notice and told everyone exactly why I was leaving. Lopez has begun begging me every week to spend time with him after my shift. That past Sunday, when I had so unsuccessfully tough-talked him, he even waited for me outside. I was not going to let things progress any further. Since this was to be my first stretch of unemployment in a while, I had also decided to take advantage and realize a lifelong desire to visit Brazil. I had purchased tickets, but had not yet told anyone at work about these plans. That Sunday came, and went as usual with Lopez sitting at his regular spot, lavishing me with compliments and repeatedly inviting me to his home. To my relief, he left well before my shift ended. When I headed home that late afternoon, however, I found myself staring straight into Lopez's face as I rounded a corner. He quickly locked arms with me and began steering me in a different direction. I freaked out and immediately recoiled. He apologized. Hey, I know I give you a lot of crap, but it's all just a tease, you know that, right?" he said, and similar things. All of a sudden, Lopez didn't seem so bad. I actually felt a little guilty, taking his advances so personally. In this frame of mind, I stupidly agreed to get a drink with him. We went to a brightly colored Mexican restaurant where everyone seemed to know Lopez. The whole group was about his age and definitely represented the leftovers of Greenwich Village's glory days. Things got strange quickly. A wrinkled old lady in a miniskirt waltzed over and kissed Lopez on the cheek. Then, without even being introduced, slipped her hands in between my legs and began rubbing my upper thigh. When I backed away, she turned to Lopez and said, "You need to open this sweet young flower up." He smiled at me and replied, "Oh, Chi-Chi, this one's too young and strong. We have to break him first." The feeling of sitting there and hearing two elderly people talk about me like a sexual favor that was about to be passed around was too much to handle. I got up and left as I hit the door, and this was by far the worst part. Lopez called after me, "Leave now!" But who knows what old friends you might just run into in Brazil. To this day, I still have no idea how he knew of my travel plans. I told no one at my job, none of my other regulars or anyone I knew that had contact with Lopez. Either way, cue 3 weeks of me perpetually looking over my shoulder in Brazil. Fortunately, my stalker lost interest by the time I returned. But let me just emphasize, Lopez, let's never, ever meet again. He waited for my boyfriend to leave. I'm a first-time poster, and my storytelling isn't that great, but I came across this page and figured I should tell my story and maybe help others learn from it. I'm a girl who lives in a good neighborhood in suburban New York City. This happened back in early November of 2015. I was 17 years old at the time, and with my boyfriend at the time. He was 18 years old, around 5'10" and mostly muscle. He drove his car to my house around 8 p.m. after work and parked across the street. He couldn't stay long and was only stopping by for a little while because I haven't seen him in a long time. As time went on, we realized it was already 12 at midnight and it was time for him to start heading home. I walked him out to the front of my house, but we decided to talk a little bit more and hang out in front of my house. It was already 12:30 and we were sitting on my front steps with the only light being the street lights on the corner of my block and one of the main roads. He was ready to leave, so I gave him a hug and a kiss goodbye and watched him walk to his car to make sure he's safe. The car is only a few feet from where I was, but I'm a worrywart. I sat on the front steps as I watched him get into his car and make a U-turn to turn onto the main road, which would lead him towards the direction of his house. Literally the same second his car turns the corner and drives away, a man turns the corner of my block, I live in the corner house, and starts walking with a fast pace. Before I could take another breath, he was already walking faster up the walkway to my front steps. I got up and yelled at him to go away. He didn't listen, so I quickly got up and ran into my house, not looking behind me, and almost missing the handle to the front door because I was sweating and shaking. But thankfully I got in safe and locked it. There is a window next to my front door, which shows a clear view of the front of my house. When I look outside, he was there. His back was facing the house, and he was on the front steps. I ran into my kitchen and took out the biggest knife I could find and hid on the floor behind my front door just in case he turned around and saw me. I could have sworn I saw a small metal object in his hand, almost like a knife. I called my boyfriend because he was only a few blocks away and he turned his car back around. I didn't look outside until I heard his car door slam about 2 minutes later and saw him running to my house. I rushed him into the house and explained what happened. I was shaking and crying. I could barely speak. Even though he was a pretty big and muscular guy, he isn't the person who'd run after the guy. I was scared to call the cops in fear of my parents waking up because my boyfriend was supposed to leave earlier than 12, and my parents would lecture me for being outside at 12:30. This whole event took place within a 10-minute interval. The guy was never found, and I couldn't recall what he looked like, due to how dark it was outside. I only saw him for a split second running towards me, and he seemed thin, dark-skinned, and around 5'9". I had no idea what he wanted from me. He never said a word, and I don't know how long he waited for my boyfriend to leave so he could strike. It scares me to this day knowing someone was hiding around the corner, watching me and my boyfriend talk for about a half hour. I have not had a similar encounter again after that night. As a personal note, no matter how good of a neighborhood you live in, please be cautious at night. Always be aware of your surroundings and make sure you are not alone if you're out at night. Anything could happen, even a few inches from your own home. Stabby Max. I recently stumbled upon the subreddit and also recently spoke to my boyfriend Nick about our own horror story from when we were kids. I thought I would share. From birth until about 18 years old, I lived in an apartment complex in New York City. It was in a fairly good neighborhood. When I was about 12 years old, a few of my friends and I were hanging out in what we called the square. It was a square with a bunch of benches, a strip of grass and buildings surrounding it, so we could all basically be seen by our parents. Anyways, we were trying to pick a game to play when this man starts talking to us from his window. Now, he was an ordinary looking guy, in his mid-30s, black hair, dark eyes. He asked if we wanted to come up and watch some movies. Now, this isn't normal behavior, even in our little community, where everyone knew everyone. Unless you had a child that hung out with us, no one invited kids into their houses, so we obviously declined. The next time we were there, He asked us again, but instead of movies, he said he just got a new game he wanted us to play with him, and he was also accompanied by a woman. We again said no thanks and ignored his offers when all of a sudden, he started throwing women's clothes out of the window. This wasn't exactly scary, but it was weird, so we went home. My friend Jenna, who lived on this man's floor, told her mom about what had happened. Her mom said that his name was Max, and that Max was a drug addict. The police were at his apartment all the time, and we should ignore him if he spoke to us again. Things were fairly quiet for a few weeks, until one night, we were at my friend Jenna's apartment. We watched a scary movie and ate some chips. We were getting ready to go and decide to take the elevator. When we walked to the elevator, there stood Max. I immediately wanted to go home and actually hid myself behind a friend. He looked happy to see us. He said his hello, and my other friend said hello back, wanting to seem polite. He asked us to please come in and watch a movie. He had some really scary movies. Why would he mention that? It struck me as odd since we just came from watching a scary movie, but could also have been a mere coincidence. Now, I should mention that I was the baby of the group. I was 12 years old, and all my other friends were 2 to 4 years older than me. A lot of times they mother hen me, making sure I was okay, so my older friend Nick finally took charge and said, "Listen, we're not going in your apartment, so go home." I got really nervous after that, assuming he would yell at us. Instead, Max smiled and said, "It's fine, just walk with me to my apartment. I want to show you guys something cool I got from Vietnam." So we decided to go. He was blocking the elevator, so we couldn't get on anyways, and his apartment was right by a staircase, so worst case scenario, we run down the stairs. He walks in his apartment, walks out with, I shit you not, a machete. I only know what a machete was because A, my father was also in Vietnam, has a knife collection that he kept in the living room, and would spout off facts about all his knives, and B, my friend Nick said he has a fucking machete. So by now it was mayhem. He wasn't chasing us yet, just standing in front of his door grinning, with his big knife in his hand. We began to run though, and he told us to stop. Some of us did, some of us didn't. Those didn't went straight down the staircase. The morons who did stop, myself included, stared at him wide-eyed as he told us how easy it would be to go after my friends and gut them, and told them all the terrible things he would do to us. He then directed us to go into his apartment, as we were about to walk into what I would assume would have been our death. Jenna's mother and father came barreling down the hallway screaming bloody murder. Apparently, my friend Jenna didn't go down the stairs. She ran to her apartment and told her parents everything. In what felt like a second, as her parents ran from the opposite side of the hallway, Max grabbed my arm and tried to pull me into his apartment. I was a few inches away from his door when Nick grabbed my hand hard, and we fell to the floor as Max shut and locked his door. We now had many witnesses to his last act of crime, since people began to come out of their apartments, hearing Jenna's parents' screams and mine when I was grabbed. Security came running down the hall just as he locked his door. The police were called. We were told to stand outside of the building. Max didn't willingly leave his apartment. The police apparently knocked down his door, found out that his girlfriend was in the apartment during the whole thing, and that there was a massive amount of drugs found in the apartment. He was placed under arrest, and we didn't hear anything really after that, except that he was sent to jail. I found out his full name when I was older. It was Max Morgan. There are other terrifying things that happened in that complex, but that was beyond the scariest.